Hello everyone, in this video I'll be reviewing all of the games I played in September of 2023. Most of these reviews will contain spoilers, so I would advise not watching if you do not want to be spoiled. But I'll put timestamps for each game, so if you're only here to watch specific titles or wish to avoid potential spoilers, you can skip to whatever timestamp you want. Before we jump in, a bit of context, this video is just purely for fun. While I'm always open to growth, my primary motivation is to create a space where I can voice my thoughts and experience about these games, so understand that the editing and production quality may not be good at all. But if you do have suggestions, critiques, or even words of encouragement, I would gladly listen and try to improve. I also wanted to point out that I was mostly inspired by YouTubers like Rasputin and Karsten who do these kinds of videos each month, and they were always super entertaining. Otherwise, let's get into the first game. Final Fantasy VII Remake was my first single-player Final Fantasy game. With its reputation as one of the most celebrated titles in the series, I've always been curious about the allure behind this beloved franchise. My prior knowledge was pretty limited, only recognizing iconic characters like Cloud, Sephiroth, and Tifa, but have not really dived much into the original otherwise. Firstly, I must express how much fun I had playing this game, so much so that I got every single Steam achievement available. I always love fully completing games that I really enjoy, and this one was no different. For me, the greatest part of Final Fantasy VII Remake is its combat system. Seamlessly combining the classic turn-based approach with modern hack-and-slash mechanics was genius. Admittedly, there were some moments when pausing the game to select spells or abilities felt kinda clunky and slow. However, the game offers a remedy with a quick cast feature, streamlining the process, with a cap on assigning with just only 4 abilities or spells. Overall, the combat mechanics are amazingly crafted, offering a fluid and immersive experience. The enemy and boss designs were generally impressive too, though I had to single out the Hell House boss fight. This fight was definitely my least favorite in my first playthrough. Admittedly, it got easier on my second go in hard mode when I really understood its mechanics. This kind of learning curve was somewhat prevalent with other enemies too, mostly because I'm the type of gamer to just dive in without reading the in-game guides or enemy descriptions, which is mostly my fault. Most of the strategies and information on enemies are accessible via the SS ability. While I find it slightly off-putting to use an ability just to get details on an opponent, it might have been an homage to the original game mechanics. I genuinely began to grasp the combat intricacies only after finishing the game and heading into hard mode, and when it clicked, the gameplay became immensely satisfying. Regarding the non-combat gameplay, it's standard RPG stuff, quests, markers, and so forth. Some side quests, like the pull-ups and squats, were really funny, but certain parts when during quests were annoying for me. For instance, having to move very slowly through tight spaces was really cumbersome. It's presumably for immersion, but it could feel unnecessarily slow. And the robot arms in Chapter 9, that section of the chapter was the absolute worst. Another point of contention was the chapter selected hard mode. The saving system there was also a bit clunky. On a few occasions, I restarted entire chapters after making an error, especially while chasing after the dresses achievement. Initially, I assumed my progress was saved with each chapter switch. Sadly, you have to complete the entire chapter for your actions to stick. Once this looks clear, things got simpler, but it took a bit of trial and error to get there. The game systems were also very enjoyable. They are intuitive and straightforward, which I really appreciate. Although initially, going into this RPG, I was expecting a ton of spells or some intense upgrades, I've come to realize the strength of its simplicity. While I do enjoy the intricate systems, it's typical of JRPGs, where, with enough dedications, your characters can become extremely overpowered. Final Fantasy VII Remake's system strength comes from its restraint. That sense of being overpowered really only came to fruition for me in hard mode, which I kind of enjoyed at least, but I recognize that this is a more of a personal gaming preference, and not everyone really looks to become overpowered or make their character just one-shot everything. As for the story, I've heard high praises about Final Fantasy's narratives. However, during my initial playthrough of this one, I felt somewhat lost. While playing the original first might offer some clarity, this adaptation with its underlying themes of fate and destiny, still had me intrigued. From what I've learned through discussions, the narrative diverges from its predecessor and is the opening act of a trilogy, which might account for the sparse explanations. Regardless, I thoroughly enjoyed immersing myself in this universe and its characters. They are undeniably the story's backbone. Sephiroth's looming menacing aura contrasted beautifully with the main cast's intricate motivations and personas. Barrett's arc, in particular, was a standout for me. His initial black and white worldview undergoes a jarring shift when confronted by the Shinra president, leading to some profound introspection. There is also a memorable dialogue exchange with Cloud that underscores Barrett's conviction and the game's themes, which I'll show in the video here. Cloud's attempt at nonchalance while grappling with inner turmoil, along with Tifa and Aerith's resolute fronts despite personal conflicts, create a cast that's rich in depth and very relatable. There's potential for greater character development in subsequent remakes, but as added foundation, it's solid. To wrap it up, I'd rate Final Fantasy VII Remake a 4 out of 5. Despite some rough patches, its merits are undeniable. It's a promising entry in the franchise, and I'm eager to see where the subsequent remakes lead, not to mention diving into other Final Fantasy titles, probably 6 or even 9. Next on my gaming list this month was Hades. I played it a little before, but this month I truly dove in, striving to get all the Steam achievements. Given its widespread acclaim, a trend for a lot of games I play, I was naturally curious about what made Hades resonate with so many players. Admittedly, the roguelike genre isn't really my favorite, though Hades managed to reel me in quite a bit. For me, the standout feature has to be the art. The game's visual aesthetic is distinct, making it an absolute delight to behold the pantheon of gods and the shifting environments. Playing the same map 100 times did not really get old because I just love looking at the art over and over again. Additionally, I'm not one to linger on in-game dialogue, but the sheer volume and diversity in Hades always meant that interactions felt refreshing and the NPCs never grew stale, which is generally impressive to me. Diving into combat mechanics, I found the weaponry varied enough to cater to different playstyles. The community hailed the bow as a broken weapon, but I never really enjoyed it that much, even after several runs. My favorite weapons were Arthur's sword and Achilles' spear. These were the weapons I used the most for a majority of my successful attempts. Combat mechanics also felt very fluid, and there was an unmistakable sense of progression with each upgrade during each successive run. The heat system was also genius in my opinion, providing players the autonomy to tweak the challenge level. As for the storyline, Zagreus' escape missions was intriguing, though I wouldn't say I was completely engrossed by it. However, as much as I enjoyed aspects of Hades, it couldn't entirely capture me. I believe my lukewarm feelings for the roguelike genre did play a little bit of a role. The randomness of each run did promote experimentation, but I often wished for a tad less reliance on the RNG. While keepsakes could tilt the odds, it didn't always seem very significant. Whenever I aimed to replicate a powerful build I've seen or heard about on YouTube or by a friend, it sometimes felt really hard to get. The dual boons stood out as really cool upgrades, but getting the precise ones that I wanted could be really hard and basically a gamble. Just a little bit more consistency might have ramped up my enjoyment, letting me have some fun with those really overpowered builds in some runs. I did aim for 100% completion, which was mostly enjoyable, yet some prophecies felt a bit like grinding, particularly when it hinged on sheer luck to cross paths with certain NPCs, and when you did cross paths with them you had to hit the right dog option, which was very annoying at times. Overall, it wasn't too big of a deal. I'd rate Hades still at a 3.5 out of 5. While I enjoyed most of it, there were some moments I needed to step back and take a break from it. Still, I can completely understand the allure for many players, and I'm very excited to try Hades 2 when it comes out. Last year, I had the pleasure of playing Elden Ring, which quickly became one of my favorite gaming experiences. It evoked the same thrill I felt with Zelda Breath of the Wild, particularly in its open world. Although I began my journey with the game last year, I only completed it this month. An initial reluctance to burn the Earth Tree down led me to wander aimlessly, causing my interest to wane momentarily. But when I revisited this month, I had just as much fun as I did before. Visually, Elden Ring is an absolutely amazing game. Its artistic direction ranks among the best I've ever encountered in gaming. The meticulously crafted environments and enemy designs frequently made me pause just to soak in the scenery. There's so much to admire in the game's artistry, but standout areas include Leyndell and Nokron/Noxtella. Radon and Malekith remain etched in my mind as my favorite bosses, and Ranni's intricate design cements her as a beloved NPC of mine. The combat system is very Souls-like, familiar basic attacks, dodges, and skillful counters against formidable bosses with varied movesets. It's deceptively simple, yet deeply engaging, especially with the challenging bosses. In Elden Ring, the weapon variety keeps combat fresh. Throughout my initial playthrough, I favored katanas, transitioning from the Moonveil to the Rivers of Blood. I tried to maintain an appropriate level for the boss fights to experience their full challenge. This decision made battles with foes like Malenia incredibly tough but rewarding. After an 11-hour fight with Malenia, overcoming her was an amazing feeling. Exploration in Elden Ring is also a captivating experience, despite the occasional eerie zones like the abandoned sorcery towns or catacombs that scared me a little. The game offers unparalleled freedom, often leading me to just wander and enjoy the magnificent vistas. The game's lore is dense and intricate. To fully grasp it, I found myself diving into numerous YouTube videos to understand the meaning behind everything. The storytelling is so compelling that even my non-gamer sister was drawn to the characters' rich backgrounds and narratives. I must admit, I have some personal reservations about the game, largely stemming from my own biases and playstyle preferences. I believe in experiencing games as the developers intended. Given From Software's reputation for grueling boss battles, I expected and even sought after that level of challenge, reminiscent of my struggles with Malenia. However, Elden Ring introduces a more forgiving system. Its open world caters significantly to newcomers, providing an accessible entry point into the genre, which is a very commendable approach. Those overwhelmed by a boss can simply venture in the world, farm, explore, and return more prepared. This flexibility ensures players aren't confined to one area, always offering alternative paths to progression. For instance, the summoning mechanic was invaluable against particularly daunting bosses, and even I used it when I didn't really want to fight a really easy boss and spend some couple deaths on it. Still, this same flexibility led to occasional overleveling, diminishing the challenge of certain encounters. I try maintaining an optimal level for main bosses to preserve the intended experience. While replaying offers a solution to re-experience these battles, I'm not certain I'll embark on multiple playthroughs. After all, the first encounter with each boss, learning their tactics and nuances, feels the most memorable. Another point of contention was the reoccurrence of certain bosses and mini-bosses. Given the game's vastness, some repetition is understandable, yet seeing duplicate Estelles despite making sense lore-wise felt jarring due to their unique design. But in the grand scheme, these issues are minor and largely subjective, possibly not resonating with the broader player base. Despite these minor grips, Elden Ring earns a solid 5 out of 5 for me. I initially rated it a 4.5 out of 5, comparing it to other not top tier games. However, reflecting on the sheer joy of exploring its world and engaging with its characters, it's undeniable that Elden Ring is a masterpiece deserving of a perfect score. What Remains of Edith Finch is a game cherished by many. Before diving in, I knew it was renowned for its deeply emotional and impactful story. Venturing into new territory, I gave this visual telling story a game a shot, something I hadn't really explored before. While playing, I was wholly immersed in the game's environment and the intricate details that came with it. The atmosphere was eerie, and I believe the developers executed this sensation flawlessly, along with the soundtrack. Each story segment had its own distinct vibe, but they all revolved around a shared undertone of sadness. Admittedly, the gameplay wasn't exactly my thing, mainly because I lean more towards action games. However, it's clear that the explorative nature was tailor-made for this story being told. Using this kind of storytelling, we were able to dive deep into the Finch's house and uncover the tragedies each family member faced. The story had me perplexed initially. Some tales like Gregory's were pretty clear-cut, but others such as Molly's and Barbara's were very confusing. Still, the very narrative approach drew me in, urging me to piece together the overarching tale. I interpreted the game's core message as the importance of acknowledging the past and learning from it. The Finch family's preoccupation with their series of tragedies almost feels self-inflicted at times. In contrast, Edith aimed to shift the narrative, documenting their histories to share with her child, which was revealed at the end of the game, promoting a message of acceptance. While many interpretations of the story exist, that was the essence I took from it, and its profound message undoubtedly has a universal appeal. In the end, my journey with What Remains of Edith Finch was pretty satisfactory. I reveled in its creative flair, and exploring its world was a genuine treat. Gameplay-wise, it might have not been my cup of tea, but I'm genuinely glad that I gave this classic a try. Its resonance might grow with time, but as it stands, I'd rate it a solid 3 out of 5. Ever since my days of engaging in couch co-op Nintendo sessions with friends and cousins, enjoying classics like Super Smash Bros., Mario Party 7, and Mario Kart, I've had a penchant for multiplayer games. With this in mind, I kept an eye out for any multiplayer games out there to dive into. Left 4 Dead 2 consistently popped into the discussions, marking it as a must-try for me. In September, I managed to rally 3 friends to join me in the game, which made the experience a lot more enjoyable. While I believe the experience shines most when shared with friends, playing alone might not offer the same level of enjoyment. We mainly tackled the full campaign with going into other game modes a couple of times, but not really diving too much into it. Left 4 Dead 2's gameplay stands out for its simplicity and accessibility, making it easy for anyone, regardless of experience, to dive in and have fun. The objectives were straightforward, so we never found ourselves guessing what to do next. While it might feel a tad basic compared to contemporary action shooters, this very simplicity might be its biggest draw for many. For me, it was a fairly average game, but playing with friends undeniably elevated the whole experience. To my surprise, the game was pretty hard on hard difficulty. In the hard setting, it struck a nice balance between not too easy to walk in without effort, yet it wasn't too hard where we had to spend a ton of attempts just to complete one mission. The meticulously crafted zombies were a major highlight in the gameplay. Special enemies introduced diverse challenges that forced cooperative play. For instance, the smoker, jockey, hunter, and charger ensured that you stick close to your team, since if you were grabbed alone, you were basically dead. Spitters discouraged camping, while hunters demand keen spatial awareness. Then the tank, it serves as an imposing mini-boss, amplifying the adrenaline as you go along the mission, which was a really nice addition. Each zombie's design felt purposeful, contributing to the gameplay's depth. The mode where players become zombies is similarly engaging, although I've only scratched the surface. This nuanced design philosophy extends to the weaponry, offering players a suite tailored to their playstyle. There are shotguns for people who like to play up close, range for regular rifles, and snipers for people who like to play long range. The game is designed just right for any kind of gamer out there. In conclusion, Left 4 Dead 2 is a multiplayer gem. Whether you're a seasoned player or a newbie, the game welcomes you with its intuitive mechanics. While certain aspects might feel a tad dated, especially if you're primarily engaging with the campaign, exploring other modes or experimenting with mods could elevate the experience. As it stands, I'd comfortably give it a 3 out of 5 rating.